Have you ever been annoyed by how Blender shows its bones and bone information? Hi, I'm Daniel, and this is my plugin Standard Like Bones. If you want to get into the guts of this plugin, go ahead and jump to this timecode, but before I get into how it works, I wanted to go over why I made this plugin in the first place. You see, I come from a background in Maya, Unreal, and Unity, so jumping into Blender, there's been a lot of little things I've had to learn and get used to. Some things, however, just seem to be completely mind-boggling, so I took the time to dive in and explore the differences, and try to see if I could come up with something better for when it comes to how bones are visualized. The core of the problem I have with Blender's bones is visually, things are starkly different compared to other tools. But why is this? What information do other tools show that Blender is showing differently? In other tools like Maya or game engines like Unity, they prioritize bone-to-bone relationships. The difference is that in Blender, what the tool prioritizes is bone orientation. This is evident with a tail system and being able to control a bone's roll parameter. In Maya, roll isn't even a thing. Its orientation is defined by the bone's rotation. So what problems does this cause? Well, firstly, when looking at the default octahedral visualizer with this two-bone setup, we need to understand that the root is actually the bone. From here, we see the child bone is connected by this thin line directly to the parent's tail, which then means we need to then identify the tail's root to then get to the actual parent bone. While this visually works, I feel like I have to chase down my joint chain with this multiple understanding structure. I can adjust this by changing the bone's relationship from tail to head, but now I have another problem. Which one is the parent? Now, I am technically going with a proper joint-to-joint linkage here, but there's no visual hierarchy for which one is which. At the same time, I want to point out this other problem. I can adjust this bone's roll and see a difference based on the amount, but let's do something quick. I'm going to set the roll here. Okay, now close your eyes. Okay, now what is the roll orientation? Actually, wrong. It's that way because I rotated it 270 degrees. My point is, I don't have a clear understanding of the bone's actual roll, only a relative roll. So what do I want? Well, I want to show bone-to-bone relationships while still being able to have the orientation control that tails give. At the same time, I want to properly show what a bone's roll would be. And this was the root of making this plugin. I first checked to see if there were any other plugins out there that might have made something for this, but the ones I found added extra things to the scene and made it even more confusing. So I started writing the plugin and how I thought it should work. Firstly, let's look at a bone. What we are doing in the plugin is setting the armature to stick while we redraw a visualizer in the 3D viewport. This visualizer has two main components. One, the bone, in purple here, and two, the tail, which is in blue. But what does this do? Well, to start, we can clearly see the bone itself, understand its tail, orientation, and roll based on the visualizer. The forward point of the triangle for the tail shows the roll vector, and the bone follows suit with tail direction as well, which is normally what you'd see. Now, we can also see that we can adjust the tail freely, just as we normally would. At the same time, we have some settings here. So, to better show what they do, I'll add another bone. We can tell the tail to snap to bone, which snaps it and keeps it locked with a child bone. At the same time, we can clamp to radius, which tells the tail to always remain within the radius of its parent bone. We can also one-time call the tail to go to the radius with the set to radius button, while also having two buttons below for easy connecting and disconnecting of bones. Let's also look at the armature settings. With these, we can set the visual parameters like color, radius, and in front for the armature. At the same time, we can set the default state of clamping and snapping of newly created bones. With these functions, we can decide to create armatures where the tails are cleanly sat within the joint radius. What we can also do is grab our bones, turn off clamp the radius, and reconnect them if we want to format this better for specific rigs or if you're sending a rig to someone else. What I also added was a joint tool, much like click to extrude. The difference is where in click to extrude, we'd be placing a tail on click. With the joint tool, we are placing the root on the click. With our settings, we can also choose to auto disconnect new bones as well and make whole new armature chains with this formatting. So in all, it's a pretty simple plugin, but it's also very powerful for adjusting bones, tails, and armatures. I think this would be useful for those migrating from industry standard tools like myself, but also for standard Blender users who want to have more control and better clarity when dealing with rigs. With that said, you can get it on Gumroad, or if you're a supporter on my Patreon, you get access to all my plugins, prefabs, models, tools, and more. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good one.